Hey, what's up, everybody? It is Pikel with League of Items, and this is going to be a little bit different for like the Esportscenter and the picks and everything like that, because obviously LEC is not playing tomorrow; they're done for the week. So just going over the matches that happened today: SK Gaming against Schalke. SK Gaming won; they were minus 222. I was on SK, but I thought that Schalke had a non-zero chance of winning the game, so I thought they were an okay play theoretically on DraftKings. Rogue against XL, I think that XL was an even bigger live dog, and I think they had chances to actually win that match, but they did not. Misfits, I was on Misfits. I think Misfits is a good team long term. Origin turned it around this weekend and had a 2-0 weekend. Fnatic, they were looking like they could lose this one as well, but they ended up going 2-0, so they're not playing well, but they are getting the results that they need. G2 Esports, on the other hand, is not playing that well and lost to Mad Lions. I'm going to be on G2 for the rest of the season. I can't see them missing playoffs or being a very low seed, so I will continuously be on them. And again, in terms of bias that I should probably talk about, I think I'm biased towards Misfits, I'm biased against Origin, I'm biased for Fnatic, and I'm biased for G2 Esports. I don't think I'm biased against Mad Lions. Some people might think that I am not giving them enough credit for the wins that they're getting, but I do think that they're a very good team. It's just I cannot think to myself that they are better than G2 in a best of 3, best of 5 until I actually see it. I think they have some of the pieces to do that, but G2 is playing they're not playing well, and they're notorious for not drafting well because their coach is not very good. Their coach is they a lot of the time in the last couple of years we've seen them winning in spite of their coach. Their coach is not putting them in positions to succeed from the drafting phase. They're typically winning the games because of mechanical ability and talent, which is fine. But when you start playing against teams that have been trying to catch you for years, then you need to kind of be good at everything. Otherwise, you're going to lose your competitive advantage as other teams become more talented. It's just inevitable. So that's kind of where I stand on the LEC matches that happened today. But I wanted to take a closer look at SK Gaming's draft, and because like I do like well, this is mostly for Schalke actually. So I'm a pretty big Schalke supporter in general because I like their coach a lot, Dylan Falco. He reached out to me a few years ago when I was doing a lot of like item analysis and stuff like that on YouTube, and we never worked together, but that gave me a decent amount of confidence that what I was doing was worthwhile and had some validity to it. So we're going to go through the drafting phase and kind of think about the different options that they have for the draft and how they should be approaching the game, given everything we know about the two teams. So first, we can take a look at the first 3 bans from each team. So SK Gaming got rid of Lee Sin, Thresh, and Twisted Fate. Schalke got rid of Twitch, Volibear, and Azir. So they got rid of Twitch because in SK's previous match, they played Twitch, Yuumi, Kha'Zix, and a bunch of stealth champions, and it seemed really good. So they probably didn't have anything prepared to beat it yet, so they had to ban it out, which is fine. They got rid of Volibear, which is a power pick. They got rid of Azir, which is a power pick. Probably a wasted ban, in my opinion. The Lee Sin is targeted at Gilius, which is kind of surprising. It is one of his better champions, if not his best champion, but Trick is also a Lee Sin player. I don't know. I just don't think it's worth a ban, really. Thresh, an okay champion, but what are you really doing by banning out Thresh? So I don't think SK Gaming is doing a great job in the pick ban phase here either. And then banning out Twisted Fate for Abadage. I mean, the guy's not like the best Twisted Fate player in the world. I just don't really understand that ban either. So I guess they had some ideas in mind for what they wanted to play this game. Being blue side, they picked Orianna first, which is not something we typically see. Normally, teams are going to first pick like an AD carry, which I think is obviously the common thing to do. I don't think it's necessarily the right thing to do, because when you're locking in your AD carry, you're basically locking in roughly 30 to 40% of your damage for the entire game. So, in my opinion, I think that you should be save like it's a big divide from the rest of the community. But I think the best way to draft is to get a bunch of flex picks in the first 3 picks of the draft, and then pick your your heavy damage dealers or your heavy tanks later on in the draft. Because that way you know what kind of damage you need to beat the other team. If you pick something like a Jhin or an Ashe, well, mostly Jhin. If you pick something like a Jhin, for example, you're kind of limiting your damage output unless you snowball. So the other team, if they pick a couple of tanks, then it's going to be difficult for you to shred them in the late game team fight. So you'll have to beat them before they actually get tanky and can be difficult to kill in the late game. So they first pick Orianna. I think Orianna is a smart choice. By first picking Orianna, they're basically forcing Schalke to not pick Aphelios, because the thought process should be like, Orianna is a strong mid laner, a strong blind pick mid laner, that has a very impactful ultimate, scales very well into the game, is good at disrupting the other AD carry, the enemy AD carry, because the ultimate is something that you will probably need to flash. If she gets a good Orianna ultimate onto you, you'll have to flash away from that. So between just as a blind pick, I think it's a very good blind pick. Orianna's a good champion right now. Schalke responds with Ezreal and Olaf. So I think this is pretty questionable, because Olaf is a good champion, but Olaf and Ezreal are not really playing for the same kinds of... they don't have the same kind of game plan. So Ezreal, I think, is a good response to the Orianna, but you're also giving up the Aphelios. So now you have to be somewhat concerned with your team composition being too clustered in late game team fights, because if you're too clustered the entire game, Aphelios is going to get additional value out of his Hurricane build. And that's one of the reasons why Dylan Falco reached out to me originally, was for item builds. So later on in this, we're going to go to like the breaking point of the game or something, or like some point in the game and do the item analysis. But I can already tell you that Orianna is most likely going to build the Hextech item, the sprayer. So she'll probably build a sprayer and like a Void Staff, maybe a Leandri's. She'll want to get a Death Cap at some point. Aphelios obviously is going to go Infinity Edge with a Hurricane, and then kind of flesh out the rest of his build with another Zeal item or a Quicksilver Sash or just something else to help scale into the late game and provide some defensive stats, so probably a Death Stance as well, even though it was nerfed. Then they pick up Bard. So Bard is the kind of champion you're not picking for the items, you're picking because he's a good low econ champion. He was built as a support, and supports are low econ in general, so their kits have additional ways to compensate for the lack of gold that they're going to get in the game. So Bard, the other reason why I think Bard is amazing is because it can deny Rift Herald. So the other team spends all this time taking Rift Herald, they drop the Rift Herald into a lane, and you just get rid of the charge. I think that's it's only worth like 300 gold, because you're going to lose the 2 plates. But if you help keep a turret alive, that is a much more difficult thing to quantify, because you're not only denying gold from the enemy team, but you're denying a positional advantage. So I think that there's the additional upside in using Bard Ultimate that way. It's a very good champion right now. Not for the material reasons that we kind of often look at in League of Legends, but for the positional advantages it can give you, and for the difficult decisions that the enemy team has to make. So Bard, when they're responding to a dragon, when they're responding to a tower siege, when they're responding to a Baron, or trying to start up a team fight, Bard's long range ultimate is very good for all of those things. Ezreal is most likely going to go Frozen Fist with Muramana, Blade of the Ruin King, and a couple of other items like that. Maybe pick up a Death Dance. But when we're getting into the 3, 4, 5 item range, Olaf is already going to be off the table. Like, it's not going to be an important champion, which is another reason why the Nautilus pick doesn't make a ton of sense. So you're picking Nautilus into Aphelios and Bard. Like, Nautilus in a vacuum is a good support champion. Nautilus against Aphelios is an okay support champion, because you still do have your ultimate. You could try to do something like dive the Aphelios under the tower, by setting up a 4-man dive on the Aphelios, but again, with Bard it becomes less likely. So I think it's probably smarter to pick ban around like dragon fights and stuff like that. By picking Olaf, you're trying to create an early game advantage, snowball the dragons, get into a spot where you're on the 3rd dragon around the 24-minute mark, the 3rd or 4th dragon between 24 to 28 minutes, and just continue pressing that dragon advantage before Aphelios becomes like a big problem, because people feel like the Ezreal versus Aphelios, they feel like it's an even trade, but it's really not an even trade. I think Ezreal has some counterplay where he can like kite backwards and be okay. But like everybody has seen the things that Aphelios can do when there's a clumped up team fight, like around a dragon, around a Baron pit, where players stop thinking to themselves, "Oh, I need to position so that Aphelios doesn't one shot the entire team." They're focused on finishing the objective or something like that. So let's go forward. So they got rid of Kha'Zix, which is apparently instantly becoming a power pick. Kha'Zix's buffs were pretty good, but I don't think they were good enough to justify going from not played at all to becoming one of like the most popular picks this weekend. So let's go back a little bit more. Okay, so we had Zoe banned out. Zoe's just a great champion. Galio is a very good champion. Ornn's a very good champion. And Ornn also makes a ton of sense with Aphelios, with Bard, with Orianna. It's another long-range engage, which is very strong. So next up we had Syndra locked in by Schalke. Syndra against Aphelios is pretty good. She has a lot of wave control. Syndra against Orianna is fine. It's not her best matchup. She does have a slight range advantage, but I think there is some counterplay with the Orianna if she can shove in the lane, put Syndra into a predictable position, and then get an ultimate off. So especially not only that, but also in the first couple of levels, if you can get one or two good Trundle ganks off, it could actually become pretty difficult for the Syndra to lane. It's less likely because they do have the Olaf, but it's not making a ton of sense, their team composition, because now you're putting yourself into a spot where you're going to get outscaled by Orianna and Aphelios. The utility of something like Orianna, not only can she one-shot a lot of your champions, she is also providing speed boosts. She's also providing shields for Aphelios. I really think Orianna is a very good mid laner right now because of the additional utility she gives, as well as the mid game power spike that she has. Orianna, she is very good at, or Syndra is very good at killing one champion. Orianna can theoretically kill 3 to 5 champions at once if she gets off a crazy ultimate. It's more likely that you're going to get 1 or 2. Very good pick champion. And then they picked Jace, I believe, as their last champion. And I don't like the Jace pick here either. So Jace with Ezreal does make sense. You're trying to have some kind of poke composition. Olaf is okay in that situation. Syndra is okay in that situation as well. But basically some of the spots that we can kind of predict Schalke to look for is setting up early around a dragon, having the other team have to walk into them, and getting off chip damage the entire time. So if the Jace and the Ezreal can get poke damage onto Aphelios, and Aphelios doesn't have any easy options to lifesteal, then Aphelios is going to go into the fight with half health, 3/4 health, and that's kind of the easiest way for them to win those fights. The long range is pretty good from Schalke because they're not going to clump as much as other teams would. So if they were on something like a tank in the top lane, it would be a little bit more concerning. So it's not the worst pick in the world. But Jason to Kennen, just thinking about how those team fights are going to happen, it's going to be pretty easy for Kennen to find flanks onto the back line. So if Kennen is flanking the back line, then it's going to eliminate a lot of the range advantage that Schalke has, because they're going to be more focused on running away from the Kennen and using their summoners to get away from Kennen. So they have to probably save ultimates for Trundle Pillar, Orianna ultimate, Aphelios ultimate, Kennen ultimate, /flank, and the Bard ultimate. So there are a lot of times where Jace, Syndra, Olaf are not going to be able to escape CC. Olaf does have his ultimate, but if Olaf has to blow that ultimate to get rid of CC before the fight really starts, then Olaf is a pretty shitty champion in general. So I don't like the Olaf pick here. I think that there are other good options. When they first pick Orianna, I think something personally, I still just think that Graves and Nidalee are not being played the appropriate amount. I think that they need to be basically played in every single game. I get that some teams aren't good at that, but that's just a problem for your team. It means that you're not a very good team if you can't play the best play style available. I also think they got kind of baited into the first picking Orianna. That makes Schalke want to play Ezreal more than Aphelios. Then they lock in the Aphelios. So they basically got Aphelios as a first pick without having to show it, which is pretty interesting. I think the Olaf assumed that the Aphelios was coming in. And in that situation, why would you even want to do that? Because, again, Aphelios is going to blow people up when they walk at his face. So let's go into the game. Let's try to find like the 20-minute mark. And Schalke had a relatively early lead. They had the 2 dragons, so they were playing around their power points, trying to pick up as many dragons as they could. But I want to show you the 20-minute mark because that is a relatively easy time to predict in League of Legends. So still relatively even. 1,000 gold. So here, Adewamne is looking for a flank. Bard lands a long-range ultimate, uses Mystical Journey to get in there, and they get 2 kills for that. See, like that's what you're looking for with Orianna. Orianna lands an ultimate. Aphelios throws his ultimate right on top of it. Olaf was able to run away with his ultimate, but like obviously you'd rather be in SK's position. So basically, when you're playing a poke comp like Schalke is, you cannot really afford to fall behind because that's going to make it more difficult for you to establish position around Dragon, around the Baron Pit. Like I say these words a lot because like so many games in League of Legends are decided the same way. So if you have a positional disadvantage on the Rift, then your team composition is going to be much more difficult to play. So the fact that they fell behind when they had an early game pick like the Olaf is, well, it's not that they fell behind. The fact that they fell behind before the 20-minute mark is really what the issue is, and they gave away that dragon. So how did they give away that dragon? Because that's a huge mistake as well. Because Schalke is, or SK Gaming is going to outscale you, so you need to be making sure you do everything in your power to get these dragons. So let's see why this happened. So right now it's on even gold. Jace takes the bottom tower. Kennan's in top lane right now. Ezreal based. Why did Ezreal base? So Ezreal was top lane, went back to base. Ezreal was top lane for basically no reason at that point. There wasn't an item spike that he was kind of playing around. He picked up his boots, but the decision to wait for the boots costs you your position around the dragon. So that's not really worth it at all. So this is what I was talking about. Now it's more difficult. Like you can look at it. You can look at it 2 ways, I guess. You can think of it as SK is in a predictable position. They're all not chunked. They're all clumped together in the dragon pit. You can start sending in your poke and chipping them down so that you can engage for a larger fight. But where the hell is Dreams? What the hell is going on here? Why is your support walking around in the bot lane? He hex flashes out. What is going on? So basically, your Schalke, you need to continuously... I guess he was trying to come on this side to try to get a flank onto Aphelios. But he needs to be with the team actually getting onto the dragon. The fact that Dreams is all the way over here, he's just completely screwing over his team. And then Schalke gets hit by... So one of 2 things needs to happen. Schalke either needs to say, we're not fighting this dragon, which is a mistake. They would need to say, we're not fighting this dragon. We weren't in position in time. We need to give this one away. Keep things relatively even, and then fight the next dragon. The other option that they had, when they realized that they weren't going to be in a position to fight this dragon, was to push down mid lane. The reason why you do it this way is because you need to be able to make a trade when you're going to give up an objective basically for free. They took bot tower, great, but you still had time to respond with another objective. So either mid lane, what they could have done here is go mid lane, you shove in that wave, you try to chip down the tower. You have Ezreal, you have Jace. they do decent amount of damage to the tower. If Bard and and SK start collapsing on the mid lane, you escape towards the Rift Herald, and then you have the positional advantage around Rift Herald. So you've flipped the map from a positional disadvantage around Dragon to a positional advantage around mid lane. I think that's a good way. That would have been a good response to the play that SK was making. But because of their setup on the map, where Ezreal was top lane for some reason, it really screwed things up in terms of being able to play around the Dragon easily. And that's it. I'm not saying it's an easy thing to do, because you get into the flow of the game and you kind of forget about the different things that are going on. Everybody kind of falls victim to that, but these are professional players, so we need to hold them to a higher standard. So Schalke needs to know that Ezreal cannot... They need to know that the importance of positioning correctly around the Dragon is going to get them that third Dragon, which is going to keep the timer accelerated in this game. By giving away a Dragon, you're giving away another 5 to 6 minutes that SK is going to be able to prepare themselves for the ultimate Dragon fight when the Ocean Soul is going to be on the Rift. That's really the issue that they seemed to not kind of play around. So let's see what happens at the next fight, because now we're at a point where SK Gaming has a lead, and the items are only going to get more and more in Schalke's favor, which is going to require Schalke to make like a very smart play around one of these objectives, or get their poke damage to push SK Gaming off of an objective or something like that. It's not a lost game for Schalke by any measure at this point. So you have, at the 21-minute mark, we have Kennen, who is basically a fully functioning Kennen at this point. He doesn't have a stopwatch right now, but he has Hextech GLP, which is going to help him flank and get into the back line. It's going to help him with his positioning so that he can get a lot of damage out in a team fight. He's relatively strong right now. He has the Oblivion Orb, which is going to give Spell Pen. He has the Sork Boots, which are going to give movement speed and an additional Magic Pen. And that Magic Pen is going to do a lot against the backline. Jace does have a Hex Drinker, so he's going to be able to deal with the damage decently. But if Ezreal gets locked down and stunned, then Kennen's going to do a lot of damage to Ezreal, and it'll be very difficult for Ezreal to put out damage. Then we have Jace with a Yomu's Ghostblade, a Manamune, and it's not upgraded yet. So the Hex Drinker and the Mercury Treads are giving a lot of magic resist. So he has magic resist to deal with Kennen's damage, Orianna's damage, and some of Bard's damage. Aphelios is doing physical damage. Trundle's doing physical damage, although Trundle does some magic damage as well. So I think that Jace is fine for now in regards to how his effective health is in the game. Trundle against Olaf. Olaf is a decent amount ahead of Trundle right now in terms of items. The Ninja Tabby from Trundle isn't really a big deal. Trundle doesn't have many great options for Subjugate. He'll probably have to try to use it on Nautilus. But that's not really game-changing at this point. Orianna against Syndra. So Orianna actually went for a Luden's Echo instead of Hextech GLP. Maybe she thought to herself that Hextech, or not Hextech GLP, the sprayer, the sprinkler, whatever you want to call it. The Hextech item is going to allow them to slow down champions, but she may be thinking Trundle has Pillar, Bard has Ultimate, Aphelios can slow people down, and they're decently far ranged, so I won't even really be able to use the sprayer on anybody besides Nautilus and Olaf. So that's not really the champions that you would buy that item for. It's really more if the other team has short range carries, immobile carries, things of that nature. So I guess the itemization does make sense. Both mid laners have upgraded boots, some component pieces, and Ludens. So there's not a gigantic advantage in that lane in terms of like the relative strength that the items give to the champions. Then we have in the bot lane, this is where we start to see a pretty big difference. So Aphelios with an Infinity Edge and a Runan's Hurricane is going to do a lot more damage than Ezreal on a Frozen Fist and an unupgraded Manamune. So that in that spot alone, we have Kennen in the top lane doing AoE damage, a lot of AoE damage in a team fight. We have Orianna doing a lot of AoE damage in a team fight. We have Aphelios doing a lot of AoE damage in a team fight. So it's going to be difficult for Schalke to position while they're running towards the enemy team. So it's really going to depend on them getting a lot of poke damage in, which is tough to do. Which is very tough to do. So it looks like Schalke is kind of sitting around mid lane. So this is good. If they just said to themselves, listen, we messed up that third dragon. Playing around Dragon Soul is probably not going to win us the game. Let's take mid lane. I think that was an option, but they look to go for contesting on the dragon. And see, this is the issue. This is the issue right here. So you had positioning on mid lane. It's unlikely that you're going to start a team fight that pushes SK Gaming off of the dragon. So why even go for the dragon? You pulled your players away from mid lane to contest the dragon, but you were never going to be able to get into the pit anyways. So that's a pretty big mistake, in my opinion. Trading the dragon for mid lane would basically put you into a spot where you need to stay relatively close in terms of power, and then you'd have to hope that you can get a lot of poke damage down before the third or fourth dragon or around a Baron fight. It is a tough position to play from, but giving up the potential advantage mid lane to go stand around the dragon is a huge mistake by Schalke, because you gave up the opportunity to create a positional advantage on the map. And again, the items and the power spikes of the champions didn't even allow them to take this fight. So we need to ask ourselves, what does this tell us about the other decisions that were made in this game? So that's one question to ask, is what does this tell us about the other decisions made in this game? And could we have predicted that SK Gaming was going to be more powerful than Schalke at the 20-minute mark? And the answer is yes. Based off of the most popular builds from these champions, I can tell you with like a 90% degree of 90th percentile degree of certainty that SK Gaming will be stronger than Schalke materially at this point in the game, assuming that both teams are about even gold and that the game is not snowballed at all. Because like, you don't pick a team composition, you shouldn't pick a team composition saying, oh, we're just going to snowball and win the game. That's not how you create a competitive advantage for yourself in a professional League of Legends game. So in the top lane, when it's Kennen against Jace, you basically know that Jace is going to need to poke and Kennen is going to need to flank. Those are the two things that are going to happen in that lane, regardless of how the laning phase goes. A Kennen, even when Kennen is losing, can go into the back line and try to have a disruptive ultimate. That's one of the reasons why teams like Kennen. I'm not a huge Kennen fan personally, but that's why teams like to play Kennen. Jace, on the other hand, requires a little bit different kind of positioning, requires you to get the poke damage down. There are a lot of good Jace players out there, and there's nothing wrong with Jace in a vacuum, but when it was 5th picked on red side, I think it's a little bit more questionable, especially the way that the draft went, because like, this is the kind of thing that you can kind of know that the potential for this to happen is there. In the jungle, we had a blind pick Olaf, which is always questionable because there are ways to like force him to use his ultimate early on or before a team fight, which is going to make him useless when that's gone. So it's always pretty concerning when you have an Olaf blind picked. Then we have the Orianna against the Syndra. So again, what are they trying to accomplish? Orianna is trying to create zones of control with her ultimate position. That gives you a positional advantage. Kennen gives you a positional advantage. Trundle gives you a positional advantage with his pillar. So fighting around Dragon and the Baron are going to be difficult for teams that have to walk in. That's why you need to be able to establish a strong position if you're Schalke, because think about SK walking into Schalke as opposed to Schalke walking into SK. When Schalke walks into SK, Oriana throws her ball out there. If you walk over the ball, she's going to ult 3 of you. When you're walking towards SK, throw out a pillar. Okay, great. When you walk towards SK, oh no, Kennen can flank us from basically anywhere. I don't know if there were many good flanking options at this point in the game. Like, there's nothing behind them, so they did a good job sweeping out vision. But, like, that's the risk you run, is that Kennen is going to be able to teleport to something like this. You're not really going to teleport here. Maybe Kennen just uses Ghost to come in and flank from this position. And then Bard can always just stop you from walking in too. So, I mean, positionally, I think this game was kind of lost. And then materially, I think this game was lost as well, because SK Gaming, as long as they keep it relatively close at the 20-minute mark, assuming that everyone was on 2 items, we can just do that item analysis real quick. It's pretty simple. So Kennen decided to go for the component pieces for Morellonomicon, a Hextech GLP, and a Seeker's Arm Guard. So Kennen has a bunch of different kinds of items in his inventory right now. If Kennen finished off a Zanya's, I think that's probably better than what he ended up doing. If he finishes off a Morellonomicon, there's not a ton of healing on the side of Schalke outside of Olaf's regeneration and Ezreal, but Ezreal doesn't even really have anything yet. So that's a questionable choice. It does give you the armor, the magic penetration, but you could have finished Seeker's Arm Guard at that point. So that probably would, or you could have finished Zanya's, which probably would have been better. In the jungle, we have the jungle. You're really not going to see a gigantic difference between these two champions in terms of items. Let's keep going. Man, Trundle was on those pieces for a long time. Okay, so it was Black Cleaver Cinderhulk versus Cinderhulk Knight's Vow. So Knight's Vow is another item that's going to help the Aphelios. When other people do item analysis, a lot of the time they go for the 3-item build. I think the 2-item build is actually much more important because it's a more predictable spike to think about when you're building your team composition, and it's gonna let you fight for that 2nd, 3rd, 4th dragon, or a Baron around the 20-minute mark, which is the more important time of the game, in my opinion. Most teams don't really take the initiative to fight like a game-deciding team fight at the 20-minute mark, which is a topic for a different video. But just looking at the items now, even after Jace and Ezreal finish their Miramanas and get those upgraded, we have Hextech GLP, Zanya's, and a Morellonomicon against a Yomu's Miramana and the component pieces of a Hex Drinker. Which one of those champions is stronger? That depends on what's happening in the game. So it depends, is Kennen able to get off a flank? If yes, then Kennen's going to be more impactful than Jace in a team fight. Is Jace able to poke down the enemy team before an objective? If yes, then the Jace is going to be more influential. Or at least equally influential. For the Trundle and the Olaf, they're pretty much the same champion regardless. Their items are not the ones that are going to make a difference in this game. In the mid lane, Voidstaff, Leandri's, Luden's Echo against Luden's, what's it called, Spellbreaker? And then she was going to build a Banshee's Veil. So because of the gold lead that SK Gaming has, we have 3 finished items to 2. That's an obvious advantage for SK Gaming. The reason why finished items are an advantage is because the gold efficiency of finished items is normally between 20 to 30% higher than the component pieces themselves. So that's not only a gold earned advantage, it's a gold spent advantage and a gold efficiency advantage. And then on the 80 carries, obviously Aphelios is much stronger than Ezreal right now. 3 items versus 2.5 items. And then he also has a stopwatch. So even if you take away the stopwatch and give Ezreal a death stance, I would rather have the Aphelios on my team almost every time. And then we have the supports. The supports aren't going to make a huge difference either. So I think that when teams are making these kinds of decisions in the drafting phase, they need to think about a lot of different things, which is why drafting is difficult. But with better preparation, teams will get better at making draft decisions. And you don't need to know everything about every champion in the game. You need to know about every champion that is quote unquote meta. Those are really the only champions you need to focus on. And there are a lot of ways to kind of make it easier to remember the significant numbers for the different champions, like in terms of how much it costs for Kennen to get to 3 items as opposed to Jace, or the amount of gold it requires for Orianna or Aphelios to get to 2 items versus 3 items, and their relative power spike, their gold efficiency at those points, their power level at those points. There are a lot of ways to do that. I have some things that I use, like quick ways to remember these things, and I think a lot of professional teams aren't doing that right now. That's one of the future evolutions of League of Legends is using these kinds of devices to remember things better. But yeah, pretty interesting game. Schalke kept it relatively close. I know that it's 11-2, but it's only 3,000 gold difference. If Schalke used pick ban better, they would have been able to put themselves into an easier. It would have been easier for them to fight down 3,000 gold, which is really the message that I'm trying to get across. So that's it for this video. I hope you found this educational. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Check me out Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and I'll talk to you later.